Jujutsu Kaisen is not a story focused on heroes versus villains. The main concept starts off with a group of individuals named Jujutsu Sorcerers who exercise curses who terrorize humanity. Regular humans cannot see curses, which creates a huge demand for these Jujutsu Sorcerers who protect those who cannot defend themselves. The biggest issue is that there is a small amount of Jujutsu Sorcerers, so they end up taking on huge burdens to exercise curses. When Principal Yaga meets Itadori, one of the most important things he says is that Jujutsu Sorcerers always die with regrets, and this makes sense with them constantly putting themselves in the face of danger. The biggest irony of the concept is these same humans are the reason for the curses existing due to an influx of negative emotion which perpetuates a never-ending cycle of Jujutsu Sorcerers exercising curses. Throughout the series, we've seen different Jujutsu Sorcerers and the ideals on what it is to be a Jujutsu Sorcerer. But each individual has their own ideology on what a Jujutsu Sorcerer is supposed to be or do. And this poses an interesting question: what does it mean to be a Jujutsu Sorcerer? The best way to answer this question is to look at a range of sorcerers and their ideology, and base it on what their version on being a Jujutsu Sorcerer is and how it has been challenged. Let's start off with our MC Itadori. Itadori's first avenue of what a Jujutsu Sorcerer should be is to give a people a good death. With the loss of his grandfather, his whole motivation begins with his granddad's words of not to die how he did, but surrounded by people he loved. This ideal is first contradicted by Principal Yaga, who states he may accidentally curse his granddad due to the nature of being a sorcerer. He later does his speech where he states he is the only one who can suppress Sukuna. If that means in 1,000 years it will cause less people to die, then he will not hesitate. His initial moral compass of being a Jujutsu Sorcerer stems from having a savior complex, and this ideology is constantly challenged, specifically through his nemesis Mahito. His ideology consisted of saving people, giving them a right death, and not killing humans. The first indication of that change is in their first fight after Mahito idol transfigures Junpei. We see Yuji first break in his resolve by killing the transfigured humans. The second and major break in his resolve is the final encounter in Shibuya, where Mahito points out the irony in his resolve. He states his resolve is weak, and he did not come with the correct mentality to dealing with a true curse. He then states that him and Yuji are the same, as Mahito kills with no regard and to further his own evolution as a curse, whereas Yuji's resolve could be easily shaken by the loss of his friends. Sukuna's rampage and his loss to Choso, which showcased he did not have the right tools to be a true Jujutsu Sorcerer, as he could not accept the potential fate of losing those close to him. Mahito's speech is one of my favourites because it depicts the true nature of a Jujutsu Sorcerer versus a curse, which in total is a clash of ideals. Yuji never questions how many curses he kills, and neither does Mahito question how many humans he kills. The only thing that is correct is who stays alive to validate their choices. Todo's speech in Shibuya is a very good depiction of his values as a Jujutsu Sorcerer, but before that he showcased some ideals in his first encounter with Yuji. When Yuji gets angry seeing what happened to Megumi after the fight with Hanami, he slaps Yuji and tells him to calm down, as anger can be good for increasing strength, but will cause them to be sloppy and lose sight of what's important, which is exercising the curse. This is further strengthened with his 10 out of 10 speech to Yuji, when he claps to save him from being killed by Mahito, and my understanding of his speech by his closing comments, "Don't limit yourself to such narrow-mindedness, we are Jujutsu Sorcerers," is to demonstrate how he should take up the will of his fallen friends, as he would be disservice to them, and to remember what it means to be a Jujutsu Sorcerer. Why his quote before "you're a man amongst men" is to highlight that these Jujutsu Sorcerers have to be far more strong-willed than the average human to successfully do their job. His next bit of dialogue talking when he asks Yuji, "What have you been entrusted with?" and states that this is the burden a Jujutsu Sorcerer has. This showcase, in my opinion, Todo has arguably the best mindset towards being a Jujutsu Sorcerer. He is not shaming Yuji for grieving, but he prioritizes the mission in hand, and if Yuji was to let himself die, then his respective sorcerers' deaths would be all for nothing. So when Yuji replies with, "I was going to take the easy way out," and then close with, "I will take a share of the suffering too," it highlights the difficult life of a Jujutsu sorcerer. Even in the face of death or despair, they have to prioritize the task at hand before anything. So after the resurgence of Yuji, and big thanks to Todo, he defeats the special grade, and his mindset changes to accepting himself as a cog and accepting that he is like Mahito. His new ideal is to fall into the cycle of exercising curses, as that is his purpose and what it means for Yuji to be a Jujutsu sorcerer currently. Geto shares similarities with Yuji, with both initially starting off with a strong sense of justice. With his dialogue with Teen Gojo, he talks about how it's very important to protect the weak, and that it's what it means to be a Jujutsu sorcerer. The death of the Star Plasma Vessel, Gojo's ascension to not needing to go on missions with him, and even the death of Haibara all led him to the cog of being a Jujutsu sorcerer. A monotonous day-to-day job, as well as the effects of cursed spirit manipulation consumption, drove him from a justice fanatic to the most dangerous curse user in the Night of 100 parade of demons. But in his POV, this was all of the sake of justice. Exterminating humans, the root cause of curses, would in theory stop the continuous cycle of being a Jujutsu sorcerer. But what does it mean to be a Jujutsu sorcerer for Geto? The whole process of this drove him to insanity, and it further highlights Todo's comment of a man amongst men to be a successful Jujutsu sorcerer. You have to have a mental fortitude stronger than the regular person, or the job will drive you crazy. Geto's decline was masterfully shown in the Head and Inventory arc, but it highlights the danger of being one and how continuous despair can drive you to the opposite of whom you're trying to protect. Mei Mei is the character with the most controversy. Her whole purpose as a Jujutsu sorcerer is what value you can bring to her. She has groomed her little brother to be a service to her, and her whole point of view of service potential that she only does things that won't put her into harm's way or will be a big asset to her in the future. Her whole reason to try save Gojo is the potential of a favor she can ask him in the future. Moreover, the biggest shock factor with her character in the midst of Shibuya when our main cast was in serious need of help. She takes a vacation with her brother to Malaysia, the same place Nanami talks about visiting. I have a video talking about the parallel between Nanami and Mei Mei, but to summarize, she embodies the complete opposite traits of Nanami. She's selfish and takes advantage of anybody, including children, whereas Nanami is very selfless and wants to protect children. This contradiction is nicely done, but it highlights one thing about Mei Mei, and that is she's consistent. She's always going to act in her best interests and will not indulge risks that are not worth it. Compared to our other group of Jujutsu sorcerers, you know what you're going to get with her, and this is why her mindset is interesting, because you never know which side she'll play. She could easily be someone who sways to aid our villain if it's in her best interests, or be the direct communicator with her brother as seen in the Culling games. Her Jujutsu sorcery ideology has been the most consistent we've seen in the series, and if anything, she shows a great example of how to successfully live a potential long life as a Jujutsu sorcerer by being selfish. The Honored One. One of the key bits of dialogue we get with Gojo when talking to Megumi is he says, as a Jujutsu sorcerer, you'll always die alone. This is a powerful statement, and it highlights his whole perspective of being a Jujutsu sorcerer, and it has been validated from his life experience. He started off as a rude teenager who did not care for the logistics of being a sorcerer and found protecting the weak to be bothersome. With the loss of his best friend and realizing strength is not enough to save those who do not want to be saved, protect the Jujutsu world, he turned to education to help overthrow the corrupt Jujutsu world. But in Gojo's eyes, what does it mean to be a Jujutsu sorcerer? Sukuna shows in his dialogue with Jogo that it means to be the top by disregarding everything, as he says to Jogo. Gojo inhabits those traits and showed his selfish and cocky demeanor, but is also thoughtful to those around him. When Yuji dies, you saw the pain he felt, and even more when Geto had passed away. because he felt burdened by his immeasurable strength, and he understands that being a Jujutsu Sorcerer is lonely. He's strong enough to kill everybody, but he can't change the corrupt nature through strength alone, and he's burdened of his responsibilities of being a Jujutsu Sorcerer. In my opinion, Gege writes a good depiction of a character who's overly strong but can't save those close to him, and it was evident in numerous occasions in the story. Megumi has some of the most interesting concepts with being a sorcerer, and his initial idea of the saves people selfishly was very intriguing to me because as a Jujutsu Sorcerer who puts your life to save other people, the concept of doing it selfishly never resonated to me. So when he saves Yuji, who in essence has shown the dangers of this choice, as shown in the Sukuna rampage in Shibuya, it further strengthens his quote of "I'm not a hero, I'm a Jujutsu Sorcerer." The second time is when Yuta kills Yuji, and Yuji begins to blame himself for the death in Shibuya. And Megumi replies with, "Don't be selfish, we aren't heroes fighting for justice, we are Jujutsu Sorcerers." Megumi gets it. He knows he's to blame as well for the events of Shibuya, but they don't have the time or luxury to sit blaming themselves, and they have to respond to the task at hand and keep moving forward. To Megumi's credit, he's been a Jujutsu Sorcerer for a long time, and has been exposed to this world from a young age, with being taken in by Gojo. He shows similarities with Gojo, who was also involved from young, as well as he's had time to have firm resolve in his ideals. But what has changed with Megumi is from the person who couldn't trust others, has asked Yuji to help save him, and he needs help to save his sister. This has been an important change in his POV of what it means to be a Jujutsu Sorcerer, and is why I believe Megumi has arguably the best mindset to what it means to be a Jujutsu Sorcerer. He can now identify when he can't do things on his own, but even in the face of despair, he prioritizes the mission at hand and has a great control of his emotions. Furthermore, him showcasing similar individuality with Gojo, with still some work to go, he highlights everything to reach the top and be a true Jujutsu Sorcerer. After exploring different characters' point of view on what it means to be a Jujutsu Sorcerer, there is no concrete definition that can be applied. What Gege does well is showing these morally grey characters and how far they go through the struggles of being a sorcerer. There isn't some feel-good point of view on what a sorcerer has to be, but Megumi's comments of "no one can judge us, we have to continually prove the worth of our existence" sums up what it means to be a Jujutsu Sorcerer. That's why people such as Mei Mei are scrutinized, because with the nature of the job, who can really say what she is doing is wrong? Constantly putting yourself in danger for those who are ignorant, to then ending up living a life of regret until you die. Every sorcerer that has died has left with some regrets, and it highlights the cruel nature of what a Jujutsu Sorcerer has to be. In conclusion, the Jujutsu Sorcerer is the one who has to prioritize the mission before everything in spite of whatever circumstances occur. But they're also free to create their own version of the truth, because the reality of Jujutsu Sorcerer is not a pleasant one. But thank you for watching. Make sure to like, comment, share, subscribe, and check out the affiliate links down below, and all my links are in the description. And let me know your thoughts on this video.
Young Mei Mei.